They laughed. Not the light, joyful kind of laughter you'd expect at a wedding. No, this was sharper, colder, like knives disguised as smiles. I remember standing there in my white dress, holding onto my bouquet with hands that wouldn't stop trembling, and hearing the whispers ripple through the crowd. Some didn't even bother to whisper. They just pointed, snickered, giggled as though I was the punchline to some cruel joke. And the worst part? It wasn't strangers. It was people I had once trusted, people who had smiled to my face for years. I had dreamed of this day since I was a little girl. I wanted it simple, intimate, and full of love. Instead, I felt like the main act in a circus show, and the crowd was laughing at the clown. The betrayal, the humiliation, it burned hotter than the August sun that afternoon. And I remember thinking, if this is how they want to remember me, then I'll make sure it's a memory they'll regret for the rest of their lives. If you're enjoying this so far, hit subscribe, tap the like button, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to know. Oh, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Layla Hassan, 28 years old, a freelance event planner. Funny, right? An event planner whose own wedding nearly became her downfall. But this story isn't just about a ruined wedding. It's about the kind of revenge you don't see coming until it's far too late. The laughter still echoes in my memory. Sometimes I wake up at night, hearing it, like the sound of glass cracking under pressure. I wish I could tell you it was only one or two people, maybe a jealous cousin or a bitter ex-friend. But no, it was the kind of laughter that spreads like wildfire. One person starts, and then suddenly the whole room feels licensed to sneer. And I remember the exact moment it began. I was standing at the altar, facing Kareem, my fiancé, the man I thought was going to be my forever. My heart was pounding, not from fear but from excitement. I had no idea that behind me, behind my veil, something had been set in motion. The whispers started from the back. A low murmur, like a bad rumor taking shape. Then someone chuckled. Then another. And by the time Kareem looked over my shoulder, his jaw tightened, and his eyes went wide with shock. The sound of laughter had already spread through half the guests. I turned, and what I saw nearly broke me. Because there on the big screen, the screen we had set up to play a slideshow of our childhood photos, was a video. A video of me. A private moment, twisted and edited in a way to make me look pathetic, ridiculous, even unworthy of the dress I was wearing. And that was just the beginning. I felt my whole body flush with shame. But deep inside, a colder thought began to form. Someone had done this deliberately. Someone wanted to ruin me. And I promised myself in that moment, I was going to find out who. The hall went quiet for a split second, the kind of silence that doesn't bring peace but pressure, like the air itself was holding its breath. And then, the laughter exploded again. Some guests tried to hide it behind their hands, others didn't bother. I could see a few pulling out their phones, recording, making sure the humiliation would live online forever. On the screen, the slideshow we had worked on for weeks had vanished. Instead, there was me in grainy, shaky footage, tripping over a curb outside a cafe, spilling coffee all over myself, falling flat on the pavement. Then it cut to another clip, me crying in my old apartment, an old video call I thought had been private, where I vented to a friend about how lonely I was before I met Kareem. The editor had added captions, bold, mocking letters across the screen. This is who Kareem chose to marry. I felt my knees weaken. The ground beneath me might as well have been quicksand. My throat tightened so much I couldn't even breathe properly, and for a moment, I thought I was going to faint in front of everyone. I turned toward Kareem, praying he would be my anchor in that storm. But when our eyes met, something inside me cracked. He wasn't laughing, but he wasn't stopping it either. His jaw was clenched, his face pale, his hands frozen at his sides. He didn't reach for me. He didn't shield me. He just stood there, letting me drown in humiliation while his family and friends devoured my pain like it was their entertainment. I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. But instead, I stood there, my bouquet trembling in my hands, my lips quivering as the hall buzzed with cruel amusement. Somewhere in the crowd, I heard someone whisper, "She's such a joke." Imagine starting a marriage like this. That was when something inside me shifted. The shame was still there, burning like acid. But underneath it, another feeling stirred, sharper, darker, stronger. Rage. Cold, calculating rage. Whoever had dug up those private clips, whoever thought they could humiliate me in front of my own husband, my own family, my own community, they had made a grave mistake. Because I wasn't going to be their victim. Not forever. I lifted my chin. I didn't cry, not in front of them, not when that was exactly what they wanted. I forced my body to stay upright even as my heart shattered into a million shards. My silence, my composure, became my armor. And as I stood there, I made myself a vow. I would find out who was behind this. And when I did, I would make them regret ever thinking I was weak. That day, in the ashes of my wedding, a different version of me was born. The ceremony never recovered after that moment. I don't think anyone even remembers if the vows were said properly, or if the rings were exchanged with the grace they deserved. What they remember is me. The bride who was laughed at, the bride who stood frozen while her private moments played like cheap comedy reels in front of hundreds. By the time we reached the reception, I felt like I was walking through fire. My white dress, something I had dreamed of for years, now felt like a costume. Every step I took was accompanied by eyes darting toward me, smirks half hidden behind champagne glasses, whispers trailing after me like smoke. I kept asking myself, who did this? I scanned the room, forcing myself to smile at relatives, at friends, at Kareem's colleagues, all while my insides twisted. Could it have been someone from a side? Someone jealous? Someone who never wanted him to marry me? Or, was it worse, was it someone I had once trusted? When I looked at Kareem, my chest tightened. He wasn't laughing, but he also wasn't comforting me. Instead, he busied himself with his cousins, pretending everything was normal, as if my humiliation was an unfortunate glitch we should all just ignore. That cut deeper than the laughter itself. Because a husband, even a brand new one, was supposed to stand beside his wife. At one point, I stepped outside to breathe. The night air was cooler, calmer, but my head was still spinning. My best friend, Noura, followed me out. She looked at me with wide, guilty eyes and whispered, "Layla, I swear I didn't know this would happen." Her words pierced me like a needle. This would happen? What do you mean? I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. She fidgeted with the edge of her shawl, glancing back at the reception hall before leaning closer. I heard some of Kareem's relatives talking during the engagement weeks. They were saying things, mean things, about you. That you weren't good enough for him, that your background didn't match theirs. I didn't take it seriously. I thought it was just jealousy. But now, she trailed off, guilt thick in her throat. I stared at her, the pieces clicking together in my head. His family. His perfect, polished, judgmental family who had smiled at me through clenched teeth. Who had welcomed me with one hand and sharpened knives with the other. Noura's voice trembled. "Layla, I think they planned this." My nails dug into my palm as I clenched my fists. My humiliation wasn't an accident. It wasn't random. It was orchestrated. I felt the rage inside me harden into something colder, sharper. This wasn't just about laughter anymore. This was war. And I wasn't going to lose. I went back into the hall with my head held high, though every step felt like walking into enemy territory. Now, I wasn't just the bride. I was the prey, and they were the hunters who thought they had already taken me down. But they didn't know me. Not really. I smiled. Yes, smiled. My lips curved into something cold and controlled as I scanned the tables, letting my eyes linger on each face. My instincts sharpened. I was searching for guilt, for a twitch, a smirk, anything that would betray the mastermind behind this cruel stunt. On Kareem's side, his cousins were giggling together, whispering behind their manicured hands. One of them, Farah, glanced at me, then quickly looked away, stifling another laugh. She'd never liked me. I remembered the way she once told me, half joking, "You're pretty enough, but Kareem deserves someone with class."
Class.
Their favorite word. Kareem's mother sat like a queen at her table, her posture perfect, her expression carefully neutral. But when our eyes met, I could swear I saw the flicker of satisfaction in her gaze. Subtle like a shadow, but it was there. My own family, on the other hand, looked mortified. My father's jaw was tight, his hands folded so hard on the table his knuckles had turned white. My younger brother looked like he wanted to storm the projector booth and punch whoever was responsible. My mother's eyes were glassy, but she stayed silent, trying not to make things worse for me. And then there was Kareem, my husband of less than 2 hours. He didn't even approach me. He stayed surrounded by his cousins, forcing small talk, sipping his drink, pretending like nothing had happened, as if distancing himself from me could erase the stain they had splattered across my name. I felt my chest ache, not from humiliation anymore, but from something far worse, betrayal. He had watched me burn, and he hadn't lifted a finger to put out the flames. I excused myself from the crowd again, this time slipping quietly into the back of the hall where the tech equipment was set up. The projectionist was still there, a young man hired by the venue. He looked uncomfortable, as if he wished he could vanish. "Who gave you that video?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. He froze.
Mom, I just played what was handed to me.
I didn't know. Don't lie to me. I cut him off, my voice like steel. Someone gave you a drive or a file. Who was it? He swallowed hard. His eyes darted toward the reception hall, then back to me. Finally, he muttered, "One of the bridesmaids. She said it was part of the surprise slideshow. She gave it to me just before the ceremony started." My stomach twisted. One of my bridesmaids. My closest circle. The women I trusted to stand beside me on the most important day of my life. But which one? I forced a tight smile, thanked him, and walked away, my heart pounding with a mixture of fury and disbelief. My circle wasn't as loyal as I thought. Somewhere among them was a snake. And I would find her. The music thumped faintly through the walls as I slipped back into the reception hall. Everyone else was laughing, drinking, and dancing as if my humiliation had been the highlight of the evening. Just another piece of entertainment before dessert was served. My wedding was no longer about love. It had become their gossip fodder. But my mind was racing in another direction entirely. A bridesmaid. One of my own. I looked toward the head table, where my bridesmaids sat, their dresses shimmering under the lights. There was Salma, my cousin, always loyal, always by my side. She had been the one to help me fit into my gown earlier, whispering prayers into my ear to calm my nerves. Could it have been her?
No.
I refused to believe it. Then there was Hannah, my old friend from university. We had been close once, but in recent years, she had grown distant, only reconnecting when Kareem proposed. I caught her eye across the room. She smiled at me, but it was too quick, too polished. My stomach tightened. And finally, there was Miriam. Sweet, soft-spoken Miriam. The kind of friend who never raised her voice and never spoke ill of anyone. The thought of her betraying me seemed ridiculous. But hadn't I just learned tonight that the impossible was, in fact, very possible? Frustration gnawed at me. I wanted to march up to them, to slam my hands on the table and demand, "Who was it? Which one of you stabbed me in the back?" But I couldn't. Not here. Not now. That was exactly what they wanted, for me to lose control, to create another scene they could laugh at tomorrow. Instead, I sat back down at my table, forcing a smile when guests passed by with half-hearted congratulations. Every "You look beautiful, Layla" sounded like mockery. Every toast to the happy couple felt like poison in my veins. Inside, my mind screamed. I had given these women pieces of my life, my trust, my secrets. And one of them had used it as ammunition against me. The thought made me want to rip off the delicate lace sleeves of my dress, to scream until the walls shook. But I stayed silent, because silence, I realized, was more dangerous than any outburst. Silence meant I was planning, watching, waiting. Still, the frustration ate at me, threatening to break through my calm exterior. I clenched my fork so tightly my knuckles turned white, imagining it as a dagger aimed at whoever had betrayed me. But no,
Not yet.
revenge wasn't served in anger. It was served cold, and I would make sure it was unforgettable. The night dragged on like a cruel play, but somewhere amid the noise and the whispers, I found a small sliver of hope. My younger brother, Sammy, slipped into the seat beside me. He leaned close, lowering his voice, so no one else could hear. Layla, I know this night feels ruined, but it's not over. Whoever did this will find them. His words were simple, but they lit something inside me, a fragile flame I hadn't realized I still carried. He was younger, yes, but he had always been protective of me, always ready to fight anyone who dared to disrespect me. And now, just when I felt most alone, he reminded me that I wasn't. I glanced at him, my lips twitching into the first genuine smile of the evening. They think I'm broken, I whispered back. But I'm not. I just need time. Sammy's jaw tightened. Then take it. I'll watch them for you. Every move, every look. We'll figure this out.
And he did.
As the night wore on, I noticed him moving through the crowd, pretending to mingle, but his eyes were sharp, scanning, observing. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't drinking. He was gathering information for me, silently slipping into the role of an ally in this quiet war. That small hope that I wasn't fighting alone gave me the strength to sit straighter, to lift my glass during the toasts, to smile even though my heart still throbbed with humiliation. At one point, Salma, my cousin, came to check on me. She squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "Don't let them see you cry, Layla. They'd love that. You look stronger when you smile." And though my smile felt heavy, I gave it to her anyway. Maybe, just maybe, not everyone around me was against me. For the first time that night, I let myself imagine the possibility that I could fight back. That this wasn't the end of my story, but only the beginning. Because as much as they had laughed at me tonight, I had a feeling they wouldn't be laughing for long. The morning after the wedding, the humiliation hadn't faded, it had multiplied. My phone buzzed relentlessly with messages, some from people I knew, others from complete strangers. Screenshots of the video had already made their way online, spreading like wildfire. The captions were merciless. The clumsy bride. The crying wife. Kareem could have done better. It wasn't just whispers anymore. My shame had gone public. I sat at the edge of our hotel bed, still in my nightgown, scrolling through the comments with shaking hands. My new husband, Kareem, was pacing across the room, muttering under his breath, more annoyed at the scandal than concerned for me. "This is a disaster," he snapped, running a hand through his hair. "My colleagues will see this. My family will be the laughingstock. Do you realize how embarrassing this is for me?" For him. I stared at him in disbelief. For you, Kareem, I was the one they humiliated. I was the one they mocked. He turned sharply, his voice cold. "Yes, but you let them. You just stood there, Layla. You didn't fight back, you didn't say anything. You made it worse." The words hit me like a slap. My eyes burned, not with tears, but with fury. "You're blaming me? On our wedding night? After everything they did?" He didn't answer. He just sat down heavily in the chair, rubbing his temples, as if he were the victim of the whole ordeal. That was the moment I knew he wasn't going to be on my side. Not now, not ever. His silence at the ceremony, his indifference last night, and now this, it all pointed to one truth. Kareem wasn't my ally. He was part of the problem. I felt something inside me shift, a line being drawn in my heart. I had married a man I couldn't trust. But instead of breaking me, that realization hardened me. Fine. If Kareem wanted to protect his family's pride more than his wife's dignity, then so be it. I would fight this war without him. And when the truth came out, when the guilty were exposed and shamed the way they had shamed me, he would see whose side he had chosen. Conflict had found me. In my marriage, in my friendships, in my own family. But I wasn't going to run from it. I was going to face it head on. I wanted answers. I wanted to storm into Kareem's family home that very morning and demand to know who had dared to ruin my wedding. But life doesn't always hand you justice the next day. Sometimes, It hands you more humiliation first. By noon, the video had gone viral in our city. Not just clips, but entire edits, strangers layering it with mocking sound effects, others turning it into memes. The comments were cruel, and some even tagged me directly. Is this the new event planner? Can't even handle her own wedding. Poor Kareem, saddled with her already. As much as I tried to stay strong, the sting was unbearable. My career, the thing I had built brick by brick for years, was suddenly fragile. Who would hire an event planner who couldn't even keep her own big day from turning into a circus? I thought at least my parents would give me a safe place to fall. But when I visited them later that week, even my father's voice carried disappointment. Layla, he said sternly, his hands clasped behind his back. We raised you to be dignified. What happened out there, it reflects on all of us. I clenched my teeth, fighting back tears. Baba, it wasn't my fault. Someone set me up. He sighed heavily, as though I was being childish. Even so, you should have handled it better. You should have stopped it.
Stopped it.
As though I had controlled the projector. As though I had asked the entire hall to laugh at me. My mother was kinder, resting her hand on mine, whispering that she believed me. But even her comfort felt hollow when my own father had chosen to see me as a failure. And Kareem? He grew more distant by the day. He avoided talking about the wedding entirely, as if ignoring it would erase what had happened. He spent longer hours at work, came home late, and when I asked if he had spoken to his family about the sabotage, he brushed me off. Don't stir trouble, Layla. Just move on.
Move on.
The words echoed in my head like poison. Everyone wanted me to forget, to swallow the HUMI. And that was the setback that nearly broke me, realizing I had no one, not my husband, not my father, willing to fight this battle with me. For a moment, I wondered if I was crazy to keep holding on to my vow for revenge. But then I remembered the sound of their laughter, sharp and cutting, echoing through that wedding hall. And I knew moving on wasn't an option.
No.
I would not move on. I would move against. And the first step was finding out which bridesmaid had put that USB drive into the projectionist's hand. The setback nearly crushed me, but if there's one thing humiliation does, it either destroys you or forges you into steel. And I wasn't going to be destroyed. I started with the only lead I had, the bridesmaids. There were 3 of them, and each had access to me, to my home, to my personal life. They'd seen my ups and downs, heard my confessions, known my vulnerabilities. Whoever betrayed me had used that trust like a weapon, and I was going to find out who. I decided to test them, quietly, without letting on what I knew from the projectionist. I invited all 3, Salma, Hannah, and Miriam, to a thank-you dinner the week after the wedding. Kareem didn't bother to come, claiming he had work. I didn't press him. Honestly, I was relieved. This was my battlefield, not his. When the women arrived, I played the gracious hostess. I prepared their favorite dishes, set the table with candles, poured glasses of wine. I smiled, I laughed, I pretended to be the forgiving bride just trying to move on. But beneath the surface, my eyes were sharp, studying every reaction, every word. Salma, my cousin, was warm and protective, whispering again how furious she had been at the wedding, how she wanted to slap the laughter right out of Kareem's cousins. She spoke with so much fire I almost believed her completely. Hannah, though, she was different. She giggled more than usual, brushing off the wedding scandal as if it were just one of those things people forget about. Except people hadn't forgotten, my name was still floating online, paired with cruel nicknames and comments. Why was she pretending it was nothing? And Miriam, sweet Miriam. She sat quietly, nodding, listening, her eyes downcast. When I asked her directly, "Do you think someone did it on purpose?" she froze, her fork midair before mumbling, I don't know." That hesitation, that crack in her usual composure, made my pulse quicken. I wasn't close to answers yet, but I was closer. I felt it in my bones. That night, as I washed the dishes after they left, I looked at my reflection in the kitchen window and whispered to myself, "One of you is lying, and I'll find out who." My humiliation was no longer a wound. It was fuel. I wasn't the weak bride they thought they had broken. I was a hunter now. 2 nights later, my determination paid off. I was sitting at my desk, scrolling aimlessly through my inbox, when I noticed an email buried beneath spam and wedding vendor receipts. The subject line was simple: "You should know the truth." My heart skipped. I opened it cautiously, half expecting it to be another cruel message. But what I saw made my blood run cold. Attached was a series of screenshots. Messages between two people, Hannah and Farah, one of Kareem's cousins. The first one read, "Hannah, don't forget to switch the files before the slideshow starts. It'll be hilarious." Farah, "Trust me, everyone will finally see she's not good enough for him." Hannah, "Send me the clip again, I'll edit the captions." My hands trembled as I scrolled through more. There it was. Proof. Not speculation, not suspicion, proof. Hannah, my bridesmaid, my so-called friend, had conspired with Kareem's cousin to humiliate me on my wedding day. The betrayal burned so deep I almost couldn't breathe. Hannah, who had laughed in my living room days ago, sipping my wine and pretending to be loyal. Hannah, who had hugged me at the altar, whispering, "I'm so happy for you." All of it a mask. And Farah. Of course it had been her. The cousin who never hid her disdain for me. The cousin who smirked every time I walked into the room. She had been the perfect partner in Hannah's cruelty. For a moment, I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to Hannah's house, throw the evidence in her face, and demand to know why. Why betray me? Why team up with people who wanted to see me suffer? But then I stopped myself. Revenge isn't loud. Revenge isn't messy. Revenge is precise. And now I had the weapon I needed. I saved every screenshot, backed them up twice. My lips curled into a smile I hadn't felt in weeks, a smile not of joy, but of power. Finally, the shadows had names. Hannah, Farah. They had laughed at me on my wedding day. But soon, they would learn what it meant to be laughed at themselves. And I would make sure the entire city saw it. The revelation consumed me. I could hardly sleep, hardly eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Hannah's messages in my mind, her words twisted with malice. I replayed the sound of laughter from that hall, sharper now, because I knew exactly who had started it. But knowing wasn't enough. I needed to act. I began planning, piece by piece, like I was building a puzzle. My work as an event planner gave me an advantage. I knew how to coordinate, how to time things perfectly, how to manipulate an audience's emotions. And now I was going to use those skills not for weddings or birthdays but for revenge. First, I gathered more evidence. I couldn't rely on one anonymous email. I needed undeniable proof. I started by watching Hannah carefully. I invited her out for coffee one afternoon, pretending to seek comfort. "I still can't stop thinking about the wedding," I said, forcing my voice to tremble. "Do you think anyone actually knows who was behind it?" Hannah leaned back, stirring her latte lazily. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes flickered for a split second. "Layla, you're overthinking it. People have moved on. Don't torture yourself." But that flicker gave her away. She was nervous. She wanted me to stop digging. I nodded, smiled, and changed the subject. But inside, I burned. Next, I started tracing Farah. I knew she was careless, too confident, too arrogant to cover her tracks. And I was right. A week later, Sammy showed me something he found while scrolling online. A private Instagram story Farah had posted the night of the wedding. It was a short clip of the laughter in the hall, captioned, "Told you she wasn't ready for this family," face with end over mouth. My hands clenched into fists so tight my nails dug into my skin. Perfect. More proof. Now I had the pieces. Now I had the names. All that was left was timing. And timing, I knew, was everything. The wedding was supposed to be my stage. They had stolen it, turned me into the spectacle. But I was going to take the stage back. And when I did, their laughter would be silenced. The deeper I planned, the more the desperation inside me grew. I couldn't think about work. I couldn't think about marriage. My whole life had narrowed down to this burning mission. I had to expose Hannah and Farah. I had to make them feel what I had felt. But every passing day came with more pressure. My business inquiries slowed. Clients who had once praised my professionalism now sent polite declines. The whispers were clear. If she couldn't control her own wedding, how can she handle ours? I stared at my planner. The dates once filled with events, now empty. My career was crumbling, and all because two women decided to turn me into a joke. The desperation made me reckless. I started waking up in the middle of the night, pacing the apartment while Kareem slept soundly, uncaring, beside me. I scrolled through Farah's social media obsessively, screenshooting everything, searching for patterns, weak spots. I replayed Hannah's words in my head, dissecting every syllable. And then one night, I almost broke. I sat on the bathroom floor, phone in my hand, staring at the evidence I had collected. Screenshots, voice notes, video clips. Proof that could destroy both of them. Proof that, if I leaked it, would turn their laughter back into silence. But a terrifying thought crept in. What if it isn't enough? What if no one cares? What if people laugh again, this time at my attempt at revenge? The thought clawed at me, leaving me breathless, shaking. I pressed my palms against my face, tears soaking through. Ya Allah, give me strength, I whispered into the dark. Don't let them win. For a moment, I felt like I was losing myself, becoming consumed by their cruelty, becoming someone unrecognizable. But then I remembered something Sammy had said. You're stronger when you smile.
No.
I couldn't break. I couldn't let them win twice. Once on my wedding day, and again by destroying the woman I was. I wiped my face, stood up, and looked in the mirror. My eyes were red, my cheeks blotchy, but beneath that, there was steel. Desperation wasn't the end of me. It was the turning point. And if Hannah and Farah thought they had seen the last of me, they were dead wrong. The very next morning, something shifted inside me. I woke up not with tears in my eyes, but with a fire in my chest. The desperation that had clawed at me last night had hardened into resolve. I wasn't going to crumble. I was going to rise. I showered, dressed, and for the first time in weeks, put on makeup, not to hide, but to armor myself. As I looked at my reflection, I whispered, they wanted to break me. They're about to meet the woman they created instead. I started small with confidence. I posted on my business account again. Not an apology, not a defense, but a bold video showcasing one of my best events from last year. My caption was simple. They can laugh, but results speak louder than rumors. The engagement was immediate. Clients I thought I'd lost sent supportive comments. Old brides tagged me with praise. The tide was turning, not enough to erase the humiliation yet, but enough to remind people I wasn't defeated. Then I called Sammy. Are you ready? I asked him. He didn't hesitate. Always. Together, we began piecing everything into a proper strategy. No more random screenshots hidden on my phone. We built a timeline, Hannah's messages, Farah's mocking story, the USB handed to the projectionist. We even noted the patterns of who laughed first at the wedding, who spread it online. It was meticulous, thorough. The more I organized, the stronger I felt. The pieces of my broken dignity were turning into weapons, sharp and ready. For the first time since the wedding, I felt taller. I felt like me again, no, stronger than me. And I knew exactly what I had to do next. Not just expose them quietly, but expose them publicly, spectacularly, the way they had done to me. The stage they had stolen was about to become mine again. That night, Sammy and I sat in my living room surrounded by papers, screenshots, and a laptop glowing between us. The same way I used to plan weddings with color-coded timelines and contingency charts, I was now planning my revenge. Sammy leaned forward, his tone sharp. If you expose them too soon, they'll deny everything. They'll twist it, make it look like you are bitter and petty. I nodded. That's why we don't just tell the truth. We show it. We put it in their own words, their own voices, their own posts. Undeniable. We began sketching it out. Step 1. Gather witnesses. There were people who saw the USB being handed off. People who noticed Farah smirking when the video played. If I reached out carefully, I could get their statements without arousing suspicion. Step 2. Timing. If I revealed everything now, it would just be drama. But if I waited for the right event, the right stage, when their reputations mattered most, then the impact would be devastating. Sammy smirked. Hannah's engagement party is next month, isn't it? Imagine her standing there, expecting admiration, and instead, he gestured at the laptop, where her own cruel words were glowing on the screen. My heart raced. The image was delicious. Hannah, dressed up in silk, surrounded by friends and family, expecting to be celebrated, and then, her betrayal projected for everyone to see. Farah, too, she thrived on her family's approval, on being the golden cousin. What would happen when that same family realized she had orchestrated the biggest shame in their son's wedding? I leaned back, my lips curling into a smile.
Yes.
That's where it will happen. That's where they'll fall. For the first time, I didn't just feel like a victim crawling out of rubble. I felt like a general before a battle, calm, calculating, ruthless. And in that moment, I knew they had underestimated the wrong bride. The weeks leading up to Hannah's engagement party were a blur of quiet preparation. Outwardly, I lived life as usual, smiling at Kareem's family dinners, posting harmless updates on social media, even congratulating Hannah when she shared her engagement photos online. But beneath the surface, every move I made was calculated. Sammy helped me reach out to the projectionist again. This time, I recorded our conversation, his nervous voice on tape. Yes, one of the bridesmaids gave me the USB. She said it was part of the show. It was the only file I played. Evidence sealed. Next, I reached out to a cousin of mine who had seen Farah laughing that night before anyone else did. She didn't hesitate to confirm, even texting me. Farah knew what was coming. She kept saying, "Just wait, this will be good." Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. But the turning point wasn't the evidence. It was me. One evening, as I stood in front of the mirror, I realized something. For weeks, my reflection had been that of a broken bride, shoulders slumped, eyes tired, mouth heavy with silence. But now I saw someone else. My shoulders squared, my chin lifted, my eyes glittered, not with tears, but with intent. They had tried to strip me of my dignity. Instead, they had reforged me into something stronger. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming myself, about standing in front of the same kind of crowd that once mocked me and making them witness the downfall of the ones who had engineered my shame. The wedding had been my stage, but they had stolen the spotlight. Now the engagement party would be theirs, and I was going to steal it back. The night of Hannah's engagement party arrived like the tightening of a noose. I could feel the weight of it all pressing against my ribs as I dressed carefully, choosing a deep emerald gown that commanded attention without screaming for it. If I was going to walk into enemy territory, I needed to look like someone impossible to ignore. Kareem, of course, was indifferent. He glanced at me once and muttered, "Try not to cause trouble tonight." His words were a reminder of where he stood, or rather, where he refused to stand. I gave him a hollow smile, slipped on my heels, and followed him out the door. Trouble wasn't coming, I thought. War was. The venue was lavish, chandeliers glittering overhead, tables covered in white silk, a stage draped with roses where Hannah and her fiancé would sit like royalty. Guests buzzed with excitement, the air thick with perfume and pride. As I entered, eyes turned toward me. I caught glimpses of whispered exchanges, mocking smiles. The memory of my wedding day's laughter tugged at me like an old wound. My pulse quickened. For a brief second, I wondered if I could really go through with this. If maybe, just maybe, silence would be safer. But then I saw Hannah. She was glowing in her ivory engagement dress, her hand intertwined with her fiancé's, her smile dazzling as she basked in the adoration of the crowd. And beside her sat Farah, smirking as if she had already forgotten what she had done. That smirk erased any doubt I had. I tightened my grip on my clutch, where the small USB drive rested. my evidence, my weapon, my risk. Because that's what this was, a gamble. If my timing faltered, if Kareem's family managed to twist the story, if Hannah tried to spin it into a lie, I could end up humiliated again, branded as the bitter bride who couldn't move on. But if I succeeded, oh, if I succeeded, then the laughter would stop forever. I sat at my table, smiling politely at the guests, every nerve in my body alive, waiting for the moment, waiting for the lights to dim, waiting for the slideshow. Their slideshow, to begin. Because when it did, I wasn't going to let them finish it. I was going to hijack it. The moment came sooner than I expected. After the speeches and the clinking of glasses, the host announced, "And now, let's enjoy a slideshow of Hannah and her fiancé's journey together." The lights dimmed, and all eyes turned toward the giant screen at the center of the hall. My pulse thundered. This was it. As the first photo of Hannah and her fiancé appeared, I quietly excused myself from the table and slipped toward the back, where the projector was set up. My emerald gown swept across the floor, and I felt eyes on me, but I kept my expression calm, purposeful. The technician looked startled when I approached. I leaned close, lowering my voice. "There's been a change. Play this instead." I slid the USB into his hand before he could protest. He hesitated. "But ma'am, this..." "Trust me." I cut him off, my tone sharp with authority. "You'll want to play this." He swallowed, uncertain, but I saw his hand move to switch the files. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. The screen flickered. A hush fell over the crowd as the slideshow froze, then shifted. The photo of Hannah and her fiancé vanished, and in its place appeared a screenshot of a conversation. Hannah's words in bold, glowing on the massive screen. "Don't forget to switch the files before the slideshow starts. It'll be hilarious." Gasps rippled through the hall. Confusion spread like wildfire. Before anyone could react, the next screenshot appeared. Farah's reply. "Trust me, everyone will finally see she's not good enough for him." The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Guests leaned forward, squinting at the screen, murmuring to each other. Faces turned toward Hannah, toward Farah. And then, the whispers began. "That's her account, isn't it? She did this. Ya Allah, is this about the wedding?" I stepped forward, no longer hiding in the shadows. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I walked toward the stage, my voice clear, slicing through the whispers.
"Yes.
This is exactly what it looks like." Every head in the room turned toward me. My voice didn't shake. On the night of my wedding, I was humiliated in front of hundreds. My private moments were turned into a joke. And now, you see the truth. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't random. It was planned. The screen shifted again, showing Farah's mocking Instagram story. "Told you she wasn't ready for this family," face with hand over mouth. The hall erupted. Guests gasped, some covering their mouths, others turning to glare at Farah. Hannah's face went pale, her hand trembling in her fiancé's. Farah stood abruptly, her eyes blazing, but for the first time, she had no smirk. And me? I stood taller than I had in weeks, fire burning through every vein. The showdown had begun. The hall was chaos. Murmurs swelled into outrage, eyes snapping between Hannah and Farah, the once-adored bride-to-be and her smug cousin now exposed under the blinding light of truth. Hannah's fiancé turned to her, his face twisted with shock. "Is this true? Did you do this?" His voice cracked, carrying across the microphone he still held from the speech. Hannah shook her head violently, her face pale. "No, it's fake. Someone edited this." But her trembling voice betrayed her. The evidence was too precise, too damning. Farah, on the other hand. I stepped closer, my heels clicking against the floor like a drumbeat of finality. My voice rang out, calm but sharp enough to cut glass. "Obsessed?"
"No, Farah.
I'm just thorough." I lifted my phone and connected it to the projector. The next slide was the recorded voice of the projectionist, stammering nervously. "Yes, one of the bridesmaids gave me the USB." She said it was part of the show. It was the only file I played. The crowd gasped again. Now it wasn't just screenshots. It was a confession. Hannah's fiancé dropped her hand like it burned him. He stepped back, his face twisted with disgust. You ruined your own friend's wedding for fun? The whispers turned into open condemnation. Shameful. How could they? And on her wedding day, Farah's mother tugged at her arm, hissing something, but Farah yanked away, her face crumbling under the weight of judgment. Hannah collapsed into her chair, her makeup streaking as tears spilled down her face.
And me? I didn't smile, not yet.
Revenge wasn't about joy. It was about balance. It was about standing where you had once been broken and knowing you weren't broken anymore. I turned to the crowd, lifting my chin. They laughed at me on the most important day of my life.
They wanted to humiliate me.
Tonight, I only gave them what they gave me, the truth. The hall was silent for a moment, heavy with the weight of my words. And then, slowly, people began to clap. First a few, then more, until the sound filled the room. Not mocking laughter this time, but applause. For me, I looked at Hannah, at Farah, at Kareem's entire family watching in stunned silence. And I felt no shame, no fear, no regret. Only freedom. Because the war was over. And I had won. When I left the engagement party that night, the air outside felt different, lighter, freer, as if a weight had finally lifted from my chest. For weeks I had carried the sting of humiliation like a brand across my skin, but now I felt like I had peeled it off and handed it back to the ones who had burned me. The city was buzzing. By the next morning, my phone was alive again, but this time not with mockery, with vindication. Videos of the confrontation were already circulating. Guests had recorded the entire scene, my words, the gasps, Hannah's frantic denials, Farah's collapse under the evidence. And the captions? They weren't mocking me anymore. They were praising me. The bride who fought back. She turned the tables. Poetic justice. For the first time since my wedding day, I scrolled through my screen with a smile. Not because I enjoyed the spectacle, but because my dignity was no longer theirs to toy with. But as the dust settled, I began to reflect. Had I gotten justice? Yes. They had laughed at me, and I had made them regret it. But deeper than revenge, I realized I had reclaimed something even more important, myself. My strength, my voice, my place in a world that had tried to shove me into silence. I also realized something else. Kareem had not once stood beside me in this entire battle. At the party, he sat frozen, watching as I exposed his cousin and my so-called friend. He never spoke, never defended, never intervened. And in the car afterward, he said nothing. That silence told me everything I needed to know. Marriage was supposed to be a partnership, a shield. But mine had been nothing but another stage for betrayal. And now, with the laughter silenced, I had to face the truth. My battle wasn't just against Hannah and Farah. It was also against the life I had stepped into with Kareem. And that was a battle I wasn't sure I wanted to keep fighting. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Hannah's engagement party became the talk of the city, but not for the reasons she had planned. Her fiancé's family pulled away, whispers of the broken engagement spread like wildfire, and Hannah disappeared from social media entirely. Farah, once the pride of Kareem's family, became their shame. Every gathering, every dinner, people lowered their voices when she walked in. The spotlight they had stolen from me now burned them instead. As for me, my business slowly began to breathe again. Old clients returned, some even more eager than before, impressed by how I had stood my ground. One bride-to-be told me, "If you could handle that storm, you can handle anything." I laughed softly when she said it, but inside I knew she was right. But the biggest closure didn't come from applause or clients, or the downfall of my enemies. It came one quiet evening, weeks later, when I stood in front of the mirror, the same mirror where I once whispered through tears, begging for strength. This time, I didn't see a broken bride. I saw a woman who had been tested, burned, humiliated, and had risen stronger than before. And I remembered the sound of laughter from my wedding day, sharp, cruel, echoing through the hall. For so long, it haunted me, the sound of my shame. But now, when I recalled it, it no longer cut me. It fueled me, because it was the very thing that pushed me to become who I am now. I placed a hand over my chest and whispered, Alhamdulillah. Thank you for giving me the strength to fight back. I don't know what my future with Kareem will hold. Maybe one day I'll walk away. Maybe I'll rebuild in another direction. But what I do know is this. No one will ever laugh at me again. Not like that. Not without consequences. They laughed at me on my wedding day, and I made them regret it. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, tap the like button, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel.